This is a lousy day because there's been a lot of fires. And there are the workers there. Here we are. Welcome to an episode of Farther Down the Rabbit Hole, streaming to you from rabbitholecentral.tv. For those of you who are watching this right now, you've already gone to rabbitholecentral.tv and you've clicked on the Egyptian rabbit. For those of you who are watching this, post it on YouTube because I'm also recording it. Any Monday through Friday, East Coast time. I usually stream from my apartment in Gramercy Park at 12 noon so that it follows my show, Farther Down the Rabbit Hole, that broadcasts on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, Channel 34 at 11:30 until 12. So today, if any of you want to call in, I'm only going to show this for those who are watching the stream. You can reach me here at Berkeley at 510-525-7937. So if you haven't run to get a pen, I'll keep it up for a little bit here. It's 510-525-7937. It's 525-7937. I will show you that also again as I remember to show it to you. Right, what you see behind me is Grizzly Peak, and this is pretty much a typical Berkeley house. Unfortunately, it's a foggy day, which is actually pretty typical too. And if it wasn't foggy, all that white stuff there, you'd be able to see the Bay Bridge and the Richmond Bridge even, and the Golden Gate Bridge. So this place has a three-bridge view, and it's kind of it's a typical Berkeley house. And so I thought that I would show you Grizzly Peak behind me, because that sort of winds up in the back. And this is the little breakfast nook that I shot a show about me and my mom making apple pie, because I got that recipe from her, and she learned it from her mother. And I'm not sure where her mother learned it from, if she learned it from the old country or not. So what I want to do today is do some practical things. We may be getting a call in from Robert Ashford because he's in the Bay Area, and I had a very interesting discussion with him yesterday. He appreciates my outreach program, but he also knows that if we just had access to those people of goodwill who are not being supported by the charities and a lot of the, I don't know if you call it a cabal of economists that see things in a very restricted way, and their training, it's not even like they're probably malicious about it, but they're just trained to look at things in a certain way. When it comes to capital ownership, the capital ownership almost has to come up, the solution has to come up from the side of those who have the capital, and they're seeing that the system is not working, and they don't want to be living in a civilization that participates in endless war. So part of what I try to do with this show is give people ideas a little bit more than what they usually get on mainstream, and also be practical, help people to be able to balance so that they can step by step assimilate more. And I think one big challenge that we have living in this civilization of seemingly endless war today is fear. There's a lot of fear about the economy, there's fear about the price of oil. A lot of people of good intentions kind of think, well, gee, maybe my money market fund is tied up with the price of oil. So even though on the surface they're supporting all of the good-hearted liberal causes, underneath this there's a sort of tension and a grinding that, you know, they probably need that oil. So then you're setting up a conflict, and the body has to work out that conflict. So one way you can help to alleviate great fear from the body, and also anxiety and anger. Anger is also a tragic expression of an unmet need. Anger is seated in the liver. For those of you who've studied the Chinese tradition, when the liver is functioning well, each organ has a particular emotion associated with it. So a poorly functioning liver is going to make you angry, and one that's functioning really well is going to make you kind. So certainly we want to have our organs functioning well. And in order to do this, you can do acupuncture to stimulate the electrical flow in the organs. And there's also another very powerful procedure, and that was suggested by Edgar Cayce, who was called the sleeping prophet. He used to go into trance by lying down and going into an altered state that looked like sleep. And in this altered state, he would channel, if I'm not mistaken, Ra, who was the Egyptian god of healing. And most of Edgar Cayce's readings were medical. And most of these medical readings had one suggestion, one recommendation, and that was castor oil packs. Castor oil given not internally, but externally. And here's a bottle for you to see of castor oil. And then the castor oil can be applied to wool. That's the ideal. But today I was here in Berkeley and I was waking up and not feeling very good, or a little anxious at 4 or 5 in the morning. And so what I did was I found these old there's like huge toilet paper things. My mother told me they were for my grandmother when it was difficult. She had to be assisted when she went to the bathroom. So these are like butt wipes, and they used to be moist. I think they had vitamin C and aloe on them. But they all dried up because my grandmother passed on a year or so ago. And these were in the bathroom. So they're heftier than Kleenex. And maybe you could take a paper towel also. So what I did was I saturated it, and I put it with this paper. Hang on. Rabbit Hole Central.
Rabbit Hole Central, this is Robert Ashford. How are you?
Hey, good. I was just demonstrating. Hello? Are you watching me on the stream?
I do not have broadband.
Oh, okay. Well, we can carry on. Nevertheless, let me just finish. It'll just take one more minute because I was showing people how to use a castor oil pack.
Well, I tell you what, if you continue for 5 minutes, I'm going to see if I can fix my DSL.
Okay.
And I'll call you back in about 5 or 7 minutes.
Okay, great.
Bye.
Bye. So that'll be terrific to have Robert Ashford call. But meanwhile, he's going to give us some, he's going to feed our minds. He's going to give us intellectually stimulating ideas to show that poverty can be addressed. What I want to do is help prepare your physiology to not have the fear and the anxiety where we go into these sort of habit patterns and we feel, oh, it's just human nature, it can't be done. And we have learned how to survive that way, saying it's human nature, it can't be done. Actually, there'll be a better way to survive if we can get our organs working up to scratch. So what you want to do then is take this handy bag, and I'll show you there, back there. You just get these hefty things, freezer bags. I know you see it easier in the stream. Let me show you for this recording one, for the light of all eternity here. Those are the hefty bags. So you want to get one of those, and you fill it with hot water, as hot as you can stand it on your skin, because as time goes on it's going to get cooler. And you fill that with water, and then you lock it. And be careful, be very sure that you get it far to the end because you don't want it leaking. So fill it up about halfway, whatever you think is comfortable. And then what you're going to do is you have saturated your belly button, because that's the seat of the lymph, and then try to aim it over towards the liver, at least for pitta types. That's the predisposition to anger and overachieving. And put castor oil on your stomach, like right here. And then you put this over. Of course, you're all naked when you're doing this. And the castor oil will be there. And then you put the hot water bottle, which I've rigged up with the hefty freezer bag, and then cover it with towels. And if possible, have something really nice, maybe lavender seeds, those eye things, so that you don't see the light. And the chances are you're going to go into a very, very deep state of relaxation. Castor oil is something really, really amazing. My friend told me, Janet Bradbury, by the way, I'm going to be going down to LA on Thursday. hooked up with my friend from my transcendental meditation cult days, and she was the one that had a little extra income coming in from an inheritance or something. And she took me to the Taj Mahal in 1980 when most people, you know, couldn't afford to travel around. We were discouraged from doing it because we were told that we would be viewed as CIA agents. And believe it or not, I think we were. I can't remember what the political turbulence was in 1980. But nevertheless, we hired a taxi and we were able to go and see the Taj Mahal. That was the first time I saw it in 1980. So I reconnected with Janet, and Janet Bradbury is going to be taking me down to LA tomorrow. And I think I might go all the way to San Diego and connect up with her husband, who unfortunately had to have a liver transplant. And she was sorry that she forgot about the castor oil treatment because she did it when she was pregnant, and they were saying that this would alleviate birth defects. And that may seem like a wild statement, to alleviate birth defects, but you know, wait until you try it. It's just amazing that something treated externally, soaking in from the skin on the outside with heat applied to it, can have such a profound effect on the psychology. And if it has a profound effect on the psychology and it makes us more balanced, in the case of the liver, I was saying, moving anger into kindness, then you know, I should read up on what the Chinese are saying about the other organs. But you know, I think, you know, one of them has to do with courage and being able to take a risk. I think the heart, when the heart's imbalanced, it's cruel and impatient. Before it gets cruel, you get to impatience. And then, of course, when it's functioning well, I guess that's the one that has courage. It's just, it sees possibilities before it. It doesn't see restriction. So again, the magic treatment that I'm talking about is castor oil. Castor oil applied externally. I'll get up and show you for the stream here, for the recorded one. This is castor oil, and that's what you want to apply externally with castor oil packs. So until Robert Ashford calls us, I will read something about the FDA cracks down on sales of raw milk. FDA cracks down on sales of raw milk. California still allows raw milk, and I'm really delighted that I can, you know, go down to the Elephant Pharmacy. I mean, there's different places you can get it. Whole Foods is one of them. And here's what the article says. While devotees call it a magic food, health officials warn it can be deadly and won't let it cross state lines. Dairy owner Mark McAfee started selling raw milk in 2000, marketing it to customers who believe it contains beneficial microbes that treat everything from asthma to autism. The unpasteurized milk swiftly caught on as part of the growing natural food movement, but the Food and Drug Administration considers McAfee a snake oil salesman and recently launched an investigation into whether his dairy illegally shipped raw milk across state lines. The case against McAfee is part of a crackdown on raw milk by health officials who are concerned about the spread of foodborne illnesses. 22 states prohibit sale of raw milk for human consumption. In Pennsylvania, officials recently busted 2 dairies unlawfully selling milk straight from the cow. And incidentally, Pennsylvania still allows the sale of raw milk. And Pennsylvania is also where the Amish and the Mennonites are. And they are famous for sticking to the old traditions. I think they don't even use zippers, and they don't use electricity, and they don't use gasoline. And you can watch them plowing their fields. Just a few weeks ago, I watched the Amish plowing their fields with the horse and the plow. You know, the horse is going ahead, and the plow is that wooden thing that sticks in the ground and then tills the soil. So Pennsylvania certainly still allows the sale of raw milk, but it must be, they have some caveat that you can't sell it straight from the cow. But lucky cats used to get it straight from the cow. And people who grew up on dairies talked about how nice it is to get milk straight from the cow. You know, it's still warm. Anyway, how did it go with the castor oil? It's good? Okay, my mom's leaving now to the happy hunting grounds. She's going to be joining some friends down at Starbucks or some equivalent. Raw milk should not be consumed by anyone for any reason, said John Sheehan, head of the FDA's dairy office. It's an inherently dangerous product. So think about it. We've got a Food and Drug Administration, a dairy office that's what, you know, some decades old. It couldn't be more than 100 years old. And it's talking about an inherently dangerous product that's been with mankind for thousands of years. I mean, how often, how long has mankind interfaced with animals for thousands and thousands of years? And I know that the animal rights people are uncomfortable about this and feel that the animals have been abused. But this again is a really, really vast area of empathy for others, and at the same time, the dynamism of relationships oftentimes involves transgression. And that's why the experience of sexual expression is oftentimes considered not an empathetic experience, but an experience of transgression. And that's why I called my show when I went on Howard Stern, Total Penetration, because what you want to do is introduce lofty ideas, but ideas that are out of the box, so it sort of penetrates you. And in a way, it's transgressive. You're violated with more thoughts than you usually have, more concepts than you usually have. But it's also very stimulating. It's not boring. So anyway, let's go on with milk. But shutting down sales is tricky because it's tricky because it's so natural to have, fresh milk. Because the federal government has largely let states regulate the raw milk industry. I don't think it's that the federal government has largely let states do this. It's the whole issue of state versus federal rights. And I think when you start getting to have such a totalitarian organization, so machine-like, you can start to be so authority-based that you're out of touch with the actual experiences. People start to trust the authority more. In Pennsylvania, Molly was hunting down one of her ancestral homes, and there's a dairy nearby. And as soon as I find a dairy, I beeline it so I can get the milk before it's boiled. And the dairy itself buys milk from the store. They put it in this big container and then it's hauled off to be pasteurized. And he had some kind of disease, and I said, just give it a shot, try it, see what happens, and then remember me afterwards, because I can't remember what he had, but I thought he would be very much benefited by the natural nutrition that's inside fresh milk. Okay, has largely let states regulate the raw milk industry. Devotees of raw milk ascribe to its almost mythical healing powers. I wonder where Robert is. Okay, the line's clear. Devotees of raw milk ascribe to its almost mythical healing powers. You should try it yourself and then see what you think. They feed it to babies, believing it strengthens the immune system and staves off digestive troubles. Pasteurization, they say, destroys healthy natural proteins and enzymes. When I was born and I was a child, I think I was breastfed for 2 months, and after that I became allergic to cow's milk, and they gave me soy milk and other things. And I had allergies almost all of my childhood. But I honestly think if the milk had been raw milk, I wouldn't have had those problems. Why were those studies not done? They could have been done so long ago. It wasn't done because they wanted a shelf life on milk. If you boil milk, it doesn't spoil. It will never sour. It will rot before it sours. But if you take raw milk, fresh milk, and after a few days it's not fresh, after a few days when it's boiled, you'll continue to drink it. And now when they're putting this oxygen in it, I don't know if you call that, oxygenating the milk, I don't think it ever spoils. I've had milk in my refrigerator, organic milk, that was treated in that way, and it lasted for weeks. That's a little bit creepy. But if you take fresh milk, raw milk, and after a couple days it goes sour. You can make the most wonderful pancakes out of it. So you can see it's a natural product. It's a magic food, said Sally Fallon, president of the Weston A. Price Foundation, a nonprofit that advocates consumption of natural foods. The FDA insists pasteurization destroys harmful bacteria without significantly changing milk's nutritional value. Now, how can you say it's not significantly changing milk if instead of going sour, it rots? And now that you're doing it without pasteurization, without boiling it, but you're doing it with oxygenating it, and it never goes sour, how can that not have a huge consequence on whoever is being nourished by it? And keep in mind, they're doing this to organic milk. Food safety officials say raw milk sickens people with salmonella, E. coli, and other bacteria. According to the Centers for Disease Control, I got something here from Skype, but I don't know this person. It's Adriano Jose de Souza. I don't know who you are, so I'm going to have to decline that. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1,000 people fell ill from raw milk between 1998 and 2005. 2 died. Okay, so you're going to talk about 1,000 people falling ill in this, what's the period? 7 years? In 7 years, somebody tell me, once I post this on YouTube, how many people fall ill from prescription drugs? Let's measure that 1,000 compared to how many people fall ill from prescription drugs. The FDA ban on cross-border sales of raw milk led to its criminal investigation of organic pastures, a Fresno dairy owned by McAfee. Incidentally, for those linguistics people, this whole word raw, I think fresh is better, but raw, meaning unpasteurized, raw has that sort of connotation of raunchy or pornography or something that is taboo. And right there you have a stigma. Who in a civilized society wants to have anything to do with what's raw or unrefined? It's just how you're refining things. And again, I'm not against culture. I'm not against cults. Cults is cultivation. But it's, keep in mind, what are you gaining and what are you losing? So in the case of raw milk, let's pay attention. And I don't think raw is a bad word. The agency ordered 2 of McAfee's employees to testify before a grand jury and offered to pay one of them to record her conversations with McAfee, according to the worker. The main issue was selling our products outside the state of California, said Amanda Hall, who refused to wear the wire. So she's loyal to the dairy. Even if McAfee avoids criminal charges, imagine, criminal charges. You've made somebody a criminal for giving him milk from a cow. You've made someone a criminal for doing that. I don't think there can be a more natural scene than watching cows graze. The whole process of how we come here on this planet and how we interact with each other as human beings, among human beings, and how we interact with the animal life around us. Again, I know people, the animal rights people, I really think they take a very extreme position, and I think that extreme position means they consume so much of their energy fretting over things that would be better understood with a comprehensive approach, as Harold Chandler says, and they could use that valuable goodwill and compassion to direct it to what's going on in Iraq, and direct it to becoming stronger themselves as a result of being nourished better, maybe incorporating a little more animal protein. And then they would be able to take on the bigger issues, which is how do we control these phenomenal weapons that we have today. So even if McAfee avoids criminal charges, he still faces lawsuits filed by the families of 5 children who allege his raw milk made them seriously ill. He denies the allegations and said testing at his dairy did not detect the strain of E. coli that sickened some of the children. In other words, the children could have gotten it somewhere else. The test done at his dairy was fine. He probably has a very successful dairy and they're targeting it. My sister's husband at the time was a chiropractor. he was certainly the victim of this type of, set up a person to, you bring up a few fake witnesses and, offer them some big insurance money or whatever to testify against somebody. I don't think it's beyond someone's comprehension that that can be done. And when we consider the significance of whole milk, of fresh milk, of raw milk to the diet, you can see that it's very threatening to a lot of other agendas that has a bottom line, and they look for bigger markets. And that we do have, I don't call it a health industry, we have a sickness industry that enriches shareholders with sickness. So Whole Foods Company lobbied for a law to ensure that raw milk dairies can stay in business. It's a growing piece of our business, said Walter Robb, the company's co-president. We want to protect consumer choice. But parents like Melissa Herzog strongly disagree. Herzog, whose 10-year-old daughter spent 2 months in the hospital after her kidneys failed because of E. coli poisoning, is one of the people suing Organic Pastures. I don't have anything good to say about raw milk, she said. It was a horrible experience. Now, I'm sure her daughter's kidney failure is a horrible experience, but really, where does the E. coli come from? And consider the factory farms, how the animals are treated, and see, do you really think that, that whole fresh milk, given to us pretty much the way nature intended it, and some people will say, well, nature doesn't intend for human beings to drink milk, it's only to put, a whole bunch of weight on a calf within a few months, and so they'll claim it's not good for you. So I don't know why Robert Ashford hasn't called. I wonder if maybe I should call him back, if I've got his number here. And maybe tomorrow we might be seeing Janet Bradbury before we hit the road. We could do a stream here with my good friend Janet, or she may be wanting to sleep in which case I'll do it myself tomorrow. But, oh dear. Well, what the heck, I don't have, let me look around for Robert's number. This is Robert Ashford's CD, Heroes and Heroines. I'm showing that to I have to have my other little camera pretty far away, so it's not going to be the same shot as on the stream. This is Robert Ashford's CD. It's beautiful, beautiful music. And I just always assumed that he was the composer, and people were listening to it who know more about music than I do, and they were saying, is he the composer? I just can't believe that he's the composer. And he is. He's a very, very gifted person. It's not only binary economics that he is a great champion of and has been for decades. He also teaches law at Syracuse University. So let's see if I can get him.
Hello?
Hey Robert, it's Paula.
Hi, how are you? I don't think I can fix my internet, but I can talk
That's
to you.
okay. Yeah, that's okay. What I've got is a shot of me in a typical Berkeley house, and I'm streaming it and I'm also recording it. So I've just showed people your CD, and I said that I always assumed that you had done the music, but people who knew more about music than I do, a couple of them, kept saying, who's a composer? Who's a composer? We couldn't have a modern day composer do something like that. And then I got to questioning it, and then I asked you, and sure enough, you're the composer.
That is true. That is I did it.
So
Here's the music in my head, and I did it.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because, we've done so much with binary economics, and you were telling me the other day that perhaps through your music you can reach the people that you need to reach. And I don't think anybody will be offended that me and most of my viewers are not yet those people. Maybe you can outline why, and maybe how music can touch
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question, though.
Kind of talk about how maybe through music you can help the world.
Well, I'd be happy to do that. I think that the world can always use a little bit more love, a little bit more gentleness, a little bit more compassion, a little bit more understanding, and those things can be conveyed in music. Music as an art form is actually a very intrusive art form. It invades your ears. It creates sound waves. It can either treat you lovingly or violently or anywhere in between. And so I think that melody is a very important element in communication. And so I guess what I try to do with my music, I'm not anywhere near as great as he is, but Beethoven had an epic about music, and he said one time that he wrote music to make life more livable for people and to give them the courage to go on. And I'd say that's pretty much what I try to do with my music too. I try to give a sense of love, compassion, gentleness, centering, those sorts of qualities in music. As depth, you know, so when you hear it, you want to hear it again. So I think all those things are important, and I've had a lot of success on a below the glass ceiling level with my music. It's aired on NPR every once in a while as a musical interlude. It gets a fair amount of play in classical stations around the country, and every once in a while I get a letter or a note or an email from someone, and every once in a while I get some sales. So, but I do think that if people had the opportunity to hear my music, they would find it really something that treats them very lovingly and very, very kindly.
What do you think is the biggest hurdle to people embracing binary economics?
Well, I think there are 4 or 5 hurdles with respect to binary economics. I think the first hurdle is that it really does conflict with a kind of a worldview that we have. We think of humans as doing the work, and the non-human things as being aids in what we do as work. And I think the difficulty is that the reality is that the non-human things do much more of the work than we do. I think a part of the problem is it's a mindset that looks at everything from the human point of view rather than the holistic point of view. I think that's a factor, and we have a discipline called the discipline of economics that's built up on Adam Smith's theory of production, which is that human beings are the fundamental producers. And that's a theory that existed in 1776 before we had the Industrial Revolution. And Smith never saw the kinds of machines and tools and processes that do their own work. He barely saw a Siemens. Certainly never saw an automatic teller or an automatic elevator or a robot that we call today, or a massive steam shovel lifting the dirt that 1,000 slaves would have lifted in the time of the pyramid. So we never saw those things. Part of it's an issue of understanding. I think part of it is that the implications of binary economics are that we have to begin distributing production not only through work but through ownership, and that we need wide ownership. Mass production assumes mass consumption, and I think that that's it's something that between the right wing and the left wing, the right wing wants to increase investment down in jobs and welfare for everybody else. The left wing wants the surplus of capital and labor to be distributed through capital, through wages and welfare. And so we have this kind of war going on between the left and the right. Neither side understands that the distribution of ownership is what's key to employing the unused capacity that we have, and is also key to enriching the earning capacity of poor and working people. You can't require people to work harder and smarter. It's doing about what they can, and I think that the market basically doesn't have need for more labor. The market has a need for much more capital to do much more of the work and distribute much more of the income. There are a lot of barriers, psychological barriers. It may be that some rich people fully understand that the right to acquire capital with the earnings of capital, which is the key binary right, the right to, in the voluntary transaction, to acquire capital with the earnings of capital, that this right is very nicely concentrated in the rich, and some people like it that way. We binary economists believe that if we broaden that right, we're going to soak up unused capacity. We're going to be able to make more profits with the capital we have today, with the tools and machinery, the arable land, so on and so forth, and also meet the dire needs of poor and working people. So it does have to do with opening up a right that is now exclusively enjoyed by the rich. And some of the rich may actually understand that, but I think most rich and poor people do not understand that capital is doing most of the work, and the distribution of capital acquisition was essential to help the economy at this point.
Right. Why do you think that you had once said that you felt that there were 10% of people who would help under any circumstances, and I'm not sure at the other extreme of people who they don't want other people to be rich? And I always felt that the majority of people would certainly want other people to enjoy wealth if they were enjoying it, and actually my enjoyment of wealth isn't as enjoyable knowing that somebody else isn't enjoying it. I would enjoy it more if other people were enjoying it. So,
yes.
What did you say you were talking about? If you met a certain percentage of very wealthy people, you felt that out of that percentage, there would be some that would really exert themselves. But I would think the majority would be pretty neutral. I don't think most rich people enjoy being rich because other people are poor.
Well, I hope that's true. I just don't know. My experience is simply a conservative estimate, and what I'm saying is that in my experience, if I have an audience of 10 people that I'm talking about binary economics to, and they've never heard of it before, most people haven't heard of binary economics, my experience has been at least 2 or 3 or 4 of those 10 will understand it and see it as a new idea and an important idea, and that at least 1 in 10 would be willing to go out of their way to do something about it if there's something they could do. Well, I can tell you, anybody who is sitting on $10, $15, $20 million is something they can do. They could easily finance a center for binary economics, and if there was a center for binary economics at a good university, that would, I think, be contagious. I think it would spread the idea very effectively. It's just a personal experience. It's certainly not scientific when I say that. And you may be right. It may be that more than half the people would be willing to share and have others have the same rights as they do. It's hard. I don't know how to put that in quantities. I once described binary economics to a woman who is a native of California and lived here for many years. And when she got the idea that people in the Bay Area might become binary owners, and that, over the time they would earn first 2, 3, then 5, 7, 10, 15% of their income from capital, and that the economy, the Bay Area, would become more prosperous. She immediately said, well, that means that the hills of Berkeley are going to be, much more populated with homes. We don't want that. Otherwise, and she probably passed the test. That would indicate she's on the liberal side of all issues and she wants to help the poor and so forth. But what do they say? Not in my backyard. We can help the poor, but don't let them crowd the streets and take up the empty lots right now. So it's not clear of this. I know that there are those that believe in academia, in the universities, there are two groups of people that have I would say worked as barriers to teaching binary economics. One are the economists, and not all economists, but the economics profession, and those who believe in these ideas that grow out of Adam Smith, that capital makes labor more productive, but capital doesn't do work itself. There are those that won't teach it for that reason because they think it's contrary to their basic premises. But there are some people that don't teach binary economics just because they're afraid that it will be too much of a stress on the environment. They don't want this. They don't want greater growth, even if the greater growth exists because we're feeding poor and working people and giving them the better resources and the foundation to better participate in the world. So it's the idea that who wouldn't want others to do better. It's not clear. People function both on absolute and relative wealth. I always tell the story about the academic who every year got a 5% raise and was happy as a bee, and then one day happened to walk into a colleague's office next door. This guy was 5% raise. He was very happy, and he happened to look over at the table. The other guy was on maybe on the phone, and he saw that he got a 10% raise, and he was miserable after that because he got a 10% raise and I got a 5% raise. So he's not any poorer, but the idea that somebody might be doing better. So these psychological things are there. My approach is to simply try to teach the principles of binary economics, and people have a hard enough time understanding them. But if you look at what the economy is doing, and you truly figure out how much of the work is human and how much of the work is non-human, in most industrial economies, and those are the only economies that produce a surplus to export for the most part, most industrial economies, capital is doing more and more and more of the work. It's like, the example we always give is you haul a sack a mile and you're exhausted. You put 10 sacks on a horse and go twice as far in half the time. The horse is capital. The horse is a non-human producer. It's doing work. And if you compare the economy of 1776 to the economy today, it's capital that's doing most of the work, not labor. And that capital has to be broadly distributed because as it does work, it also distributes income. So these are principles, and the psychological resistances are certainly there, and it's good to try to understand them. But it's really most important, I think, to understand the fundamentals of binary economics.
Say, Robert, I don't think if people are concerned about the environment, I don't think that's merely a psychological problem. I think that should be addressed and resolved. Now, I know the Berkeley Hills because I grew up in the Berkeley Hills, and that's the background. If you were online, you'd be able to see. We're looking up Grizzly Peak. But just because this area is so beautiful doesn't mean that there might not be a more efficient design method that could allow people to live in even a space that has the particular magic that Berkeley does, and particularly the hills. I mean, you've got Maybeck houses, you've got, great architecture from the past, and I used to sort of recoil from Buckminster Fuller because I thought, I don't want to live in a geodesic dome. But maybe these are two extremes. Maybe with more abundance, with people sort of freed up and they're not working at the call centers or whatever the menial jobs are that are left over from the society as it's evolved, there can be more creativity, and we may also be able to address other issues like the nuclear family. Sometimes it's considered that it's not so efficient. Maybe a woman wants to have a chance to go out and do other things, but if she's taking care of her child, maybe even two, it's not as good as if maybe she was trading with other mothers and she could take 5 one day and one day she's free. Maybe in a different housing arrangement, that kind of choice would be easier than driving your car down, dropping it off, you know, the kids. So I don't buy the fact that binary economics is going to make people too rich, and as a result they're going to be too polluting and they're going to mess up the environment more. As a matter of fact, I feel if you just take an airplane trip and you go from coast to coast or anywhere, you'll see that there's plenty of land, and if we're utilizing it more intelligently, it will work better. Then you've got the whole thing about on YouTube, there's quite a few postings now of cars that are running on water. So this is something that's been whispered about, and people are frightened. Sometimes they say, oh, you know, the big oil companies go out and send hitmen, and if you're an inventor. But it seems these inventions are coming up like mushrooms that do not need oil, and they don't have to have that pollution. And then you have to start to address the whole thing about global warming. Man-made global warming stands on very shaky science. So I think that this is not a psychological problem. If people really believe that more wealth means that you've got more human beings that inherently are dirty and bad and wrong, I think that's a psychological problem from which all of these others start to take root. You know, you sell people on false science, and you block technologies that wouldn't have pollution and so on. I
agree with you.
I think you need more abundance.
I agree. And you're right to point out that the psychology of the professor who's unhappy because someone else gets a bigger raise is not the same thing as the concern for the environment and a question as to what will happen as the economy grows more. So I think that's not that second issue is not a psychological issue. But I do think that a decision not to teach binary economics because it might promote more growth. We shouldn't have more growth for some because growth will pollute. I think that kind of thinking is a superficial thinking, and we have to do exactly what you talked about, and that is to say to look at the assaults on the environment in a scientific way and in a rigorous way, and to see how it is we can do things better. One of the reasons I'm so intrigued with binary economics is that I think it provides a way to profitably employ for all people, profitable for everybody, to employ the capacities we have. And I think many environmental problems, in fact, I think you could look at environmental policy in this way. If we have an environmental problem, there are three that is man-made. If we do, in this particular instance or wherever it is, there are three things you can do. One thing you can do is to prohibit the activity. You know, thou shalt not do it. The second thing you can do is these kind of what they call cap and trade, these market incentives, where you give market incentives for people to produce things better. The third thing you can do is to develop greater technologies so there's a brown way of doing something and there's a green way of doing something, and you shift to the green way. Well, the main reason why we don't do things in a greener way is because people can't afford to do them in a greener way. You might say they can't afford not to in the long run, but they can't afford not to in the short run, and they're living in the short run. So a binary economy will employ more unused capacity in a profitable way. It will promote greener growth. because the people who are enriched in a binary economy are, to a significant degree, are people who have unmet needs and wants. They need more food, they need more clothing, they need more shelter. And these basic elements, number one, I don't think they pollute as much as some of the others, but even more important, these things can be done in greener ways as the earning capacity of people increases. I think we have huge unused capacity, and I think we have huge unused capacity because we have terribly concentrated ownership.
Right.
Capital buys itself with the earnings of capital for a group of people that fundamentally don't need and don't choose to spend more on consumer goods. They just look to invest capital in more capital.
And then pretty soon those investments become things like war and weapons, and I think that's a concern. In our last 5 minutes, can you kind of outline what we could expect if you got a school of binary economics funded? Say somebody came along and said, here's the $5 million, or better, as you said, $10 million. Can you sort of outline what would happen with such a school?
Well, what it would, I think it would do 2 or 3 things, maybe. First of all, I have a belief that that binary economics is the most important idea that people know almost nothing about. There are many important ideas, but most of them, at least billions of people know about it. My guess is not more than 5,000 or 10,000 people really have an understanding of binary economics in the whole world. So if there was suddenly a center at Berkeley, or Stanford, or University of Santa Clara, or University of San Francisco, for binary economics, my belief is that this, the very imprimatur of the center, will give it a kind of legitimacy. I often say the reason there are 10 centers in binary economics is because there's not one. So it would simply create the idea that people are interested in enough in this, and particularly a rich person is interested enough in this, to put his or her name on the center and have it go. I think there'll be copycat centers, and we need more copycats here. So I think there's that. There are conferences all around the world that where prestigious people talk about the problem, and all the problems are talked about with the assumption that capital makes labor more productive. That capital can buy itself for the rich but not the poor, and that the way to help poor people is through jobs and welfare and training. That's a philosophy, and they we've been debating that for 150 years. The binary argument needs to be carried too. If I go there as this kind of old Professor Ashford who's a nobody and teaching at a school where they don't even think it's important enough to have a center on the subject, how important is the subject? If that's the case. But if I go to a conference where I am the director of the Center for Binary Economics at, let's say, Berkeley or Stanford or some school of that sort. Well, first of all, now I have a platform, and the school's behind me, and they're in favor of it. And I can go to, and I've got a budget so that when there's an important conference going, I can be there to argue the binary case and to establish, which I think you can do very easily, that it is a more effective approach to left-wing and right-wing approaches. Well, that begins to put something on the map, and again, others I think will begin doing the same thing. Provides a platform and a legitimating function. It would be nice if someone like Bill Moyers, for example, who does in the media, that's to say, you're more likely to get a mainstream press to cover something if you've got a center at Stanford or Berkeley or University of San Francisco, or University of Santa Clara, or a whole host of other schools where it could be. More likely to get publicity. My guess is if I were called Michael Krasny, who does the talk show here, they'd like you to do a program on binary economics. Say, well, who are you? You're a professor from Syracuse. What's behind you? But if there was a center for this subject, my guess is that Michael Krasny might do something. He does, Diane Rehm on the NPR. I mean, you work with Howard Stern. I mean, it creates a critical mass of a foundation for understanding. People need this legitimating function. And that's what a censor would do. I could teach students. Well, I had a wonderful experience. One of my students took my binary economics seminar at Syracuse University, offered now for the first time in 10 years, this last semester, wrote a paper. They all have to write papers. The student got his paper accepted at the Penn State Law Review. The title of his paper was wonderful. It was called Reviving the Forgotten American Dream. And it's all about how we started the country with an emphasis on private property and ownership. But ownership is hardly even a part of the American dream. We only see it in housing. And housing has been used as kind of like piggy banks to cash out money, and people are losing their homes and all of that. It's all because of concentrated ownership.
Say, Robert, that's really interesting. Maybe I can get that fellow to be on my show, and he can talk about his paper.
I'm sure he'd be very happy to do that. I can arrange that.
Yeah.
He's studying for the bar right now, so he might be a little bit distracted, but I think he'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, but, after he's studying, we can work that out. I'm thinking, now that there is a housing crisis, and you could do some arrangement where the bank would continue to lend against the home because he has the capacity to buy capital on the basis of earnings a future capital in a corporation.
That could happen. The difficulty is you can't do this can't do a binary system without opening up the high levels of corporate finance, which now are protected only really for existing owners.
I know, but
I don't think individual banks can do it. But
that I understand. But Robert, what I'm saying is people like you and me and this alternative media can do is to put the word out that because we don't have a school, where this is being studied, this is being blocked, and it's something that if the corporate level finance was available, the whole country could be bailed out.
Absolutely. It really, some people say, well, the housing crisis shows that binary economics doesn't work, and I say just the opposite. The housing crisis shows that without binary economics, not even your homes are safe.
Right.
Not even your homes are safe, ladies and gentlemen, because unless you can acquire capital with the earnings of capital, you cannot compete with the rich.
Right.
It cannot be done. You're asking someone who's hauling a sack on his back to compete with somebody who's hauling sacks because he owns a horse and he's got 20 sacks on it. You can't compete with capital for work. Can't be done.
Right.
And everybody needs capital.
So to underscore what you said, because I've had past talks with you, you're saying that that we sort of have a precedent for binary with the federally insured home loans, but that you needed to widen that out so that you would have ownership of a company that was producing something.
A diversified portfolio in all of America's industries that are producing things, yes.
Right.
Every rich person has a diversified portfolio of major industrial companies. It's not a rich person that doesn't do that. Gates may have made his fortune on Microsoft, but he's diversified in his own personal wealth. Every rich person invests in that.
Right.
Letting someone buy a home doesn't give them access to that critical, broader investment.
Right.
That critical, broader investment could be much more profitable if the ownership of that was more broadly shared. It won't make the pie smaller, and it won't require people to cut up the pieces of the same pie. It'll create a much bigger pie. That's the missing element in analysis right now.
That's wonderful.
The growth. There's three principles. Capital does its own work. Technology, just like a horse does its own work. Technology makes capital much more productive than labor. And the more broadly capital is acquired, the faster the economy will grow, and the richer everybody will become, most particularly poor and working people.
Well, that's great. We're just running out of tape. So, Robert, thank you for calling us, and we look forward to working with you more in the future.
Wonderful. You're doing very important work, and I hope that anything we can do. You started with my music. You're always free to play it because we can talk about music.
I know.
They hear it. It's just words.
Great. Well, I'll get this loaded up on YouTube, and we'll get it out there, and let's just see what happens.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paula. You do great work. You're really a heroine in the world. Thank you. Take care of yourself.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. Bye.
Bye-bye.
What I'll do is, if anybody's been listening so far and you're interested, we won't be able to record it anymore, but we can stream it. I'm at 510-525-7937. So I know this has been a pretty long stream for an hour, but if anyone's out there and they just want to share a few thoughts, it won't be recorded for the light of all eternity. But, oh, actually, maybe I do have a little tape running still. I have a couple more minutes maybe, so give me a call at 510-525-7937, and this is my ancestral home here in Berkeley, California. And if I don't hear from anybody quite soon, or maybe some shy people, let me check my emails, may have sent an email about the stream. I know maybe some people are shy to say what's really on their mind, that this will never work because human nature is greedy and so on. But nope, it doesn't seem to be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is 525-7937. If nobody's calling, I will just end the stream. Check the email, give you a chance here. Wow, Nico Haupt's got the top 100 plane hugger war criminal list. Tiny URL. Top 100 all-time plane huggers, war criminals. And, oh, here's the top 30. Mike Rupert, David Ray Griffin, Stephen E. Jones is 3, 4, Alex Jones, 5, Stephen Paul Joseph Watson, 6, Richard Gay, 7, William Rodriguez, 8, Alexander Flau, also known as George Washington, 9, 911blogger.com, so he's giving it to a whole blog site, 10, W. David Kubiak, 11, Les Jameson, 12, Amy Goodman, 13, George Soros, 14, Archbishop Dr. Robert Bowman, 15, Ian Wood, Global Outlook, 16, Nick Levis, a.k.a. Jesus Christ, a.k.a. Jack Riddler, a.k.a. Nicholas,